Welcome to the Altered Call podcast. Money is a powerful tool in the world, but like any tool, we can be tempted to use it incorrectly or to allow it to shape our lives in unintended ways. My name is Pillischafske. I believe that everything is too dang expensive. I believe that the future belongs to God, and I believe that you are uniquely created to reflect God's glory in the world. Recapping the framework. As Christians, we're meant to bring glory to God generally through our purpose and specifically through our various callings. The enemy wants to prevent this by forcing us to stumble in any of an infinite number of ways. Stewardship is the application of our current knowledge and ability to defend our lives against that enemy. The discipleship path is an optional framework that you can use to build and maintain standards that relate to self, family, vocation, and church. This is meant to create a baseline of stewardship from which we can explore specific callings of God. We start by establishing minimum standards strong enough to ensure that we are being faithful and on which we can build our desired lives. We will maintain these standards until we are given a specific calling of God, which we will prioritize accordingly. This episode is hard for me because the Bible has a lot to say about money, and given that my degree is in finance, I also have a lot to say about money. I'm going to try to limit this episode to relevant details as regards setting a minimum standard, and then I will get into more technical aspects regarding money in a second episode. The analogy that I like to use for money is the idea of getting on an airplane. Let's say that you know where you want to go. The most efficient way would be to find a plane that goes there in the fewest flights necessary. If you don't know where you're going, you can just keep hopping on planes and hope that you end up there by accident. Money is a tool, not an end in itself. But because it is such a dynamic tool, we are often tempted to confuse those ideas, assuming that more money is the answer, instead of attempting to figure out what we actually need and proceeding accordingly. Let's start with what money is. Money was designed as a medium of exchange, not as a way of storing value. This means that money allows people to convert the value generated through their work into other goods and services. Instead of attempting to trade goods with other providers, we exchange our goods or services for money that can then be exchanged for the goods and services that we desire in return. Many people confuse money with wealth, which is stored up over time by converting excess money into assets. This leads to lots of confusion, so I'm going to address those two ideas separately. Limiting our view to money as a medium, let's first address money for its intended use as a way of converting work into necessary goods. In modern times, this looks like creating a budget. Regardless of how much money we make or how much we save, we cannot be considered good stewards in this area if we don't understand where our money is going. If you have never operated on a budget, then the transition will take some time. You will need to gain a thorough understanding of your income and then attempt to categorize your outflows. I recommend setting an initial budget that you assume to be true and then adjusting it weekly as new information comes in. You will learn very quickly that your money is not going where you originally assumed. You will also run into many items that you will want to qualify as exceptions, only to realize that exceptions of that size and type seem to occur with regularity. In my house, we break down our budget into specific stable categories like food and gas, as well as flexible categories to cover things that are unique to each month, and finally a sinking fund where we stash away money each month for annual big-ticket items like taxes and insurance. Good financial stewardship requires that we understand all of the various pulls on our income and generate a plan that addresses each of those items. If we are always reacting to our money and treating each routine item as an emergency, then we are not being good stewards. Once we have a thorough understanding of where our money is going, we can start to intentionally redirect the money where we want it to go. By shattering the illusion that we once held regarding our cash flows, we begin to realize that certain areas are out of balance. Do we really spend that much money eating out? Do we spend hundreds of dollars a month on things that are unexpected? How is half of our money going towards debt? Do taxes really take that much out of my pay? I thought I had more than that. For many people, This transition is scary, but if we want to honor God with our finances, it is a necessary step. Next, you want to start exploring entitlement and consumption. Our economy is built around consumption. We are encouraged to spend all of our money in pursuit of things that are in tremendous excess of what is necessary to live. As recently as 50 years ago, most of humanity would have traded everything that they own for a device like an iPhone, and now we all treat such a thing as a necessity. Cars are no longer designed for transportation, but as status symbols designed to impress fellow travelers that we will likely never meet, or as palaces of luxury such that the one road trip that we take each year is slightly more comfortable. I do not believe that any of these luxuries are bad, but when we realize how much of our life is dedicated to the pursuit of these things, the numbers are scary. The difference in a $15,000 and $30,000 car, as relates transportation, is basically non-existent. Yet that $15,000 difference in price equates to several months of work for the average household. The question that we need to ask is, do we really want to spend 4 or 5 months of work dedicated exclusively to having a nicer car? The worst part is that cars are also replaced far too often, so we aren't simply dedicating that extra work once, but often every handful of years to support our lifestyle. Now extend this thinking to all of the various ways that we buy products far beyond what we need. Our house, our other car, computers, subscriptions, activities, memberships. Again, none of these things are bad, but we are trading our time for each of them. And if these things are purchased leveraging debt, then we also get to pay a premium for the privilege. When my wife and I purchased our first home, we were approved for approximately 3 times the amount that we decided to spend. We bought a small condo in a less appealing part of town specifically so that we could aggressively pay down the mortgage, avoid as much unnecessary interest as possible, and then move up to a nicer home further down the road. We didn't love the home, but it was an improvement over the 1-bedroom apartment where we had lived, and it was far more than enough for the 2 of us to live comfortably. 5 years later, after our son was born and when we started talking about having another child, we decided to move up in home. I estimate that between money saved on interest, taxes, insurance, and even accounting for different appreciation in the 2 hypothetical homes, that we saved approximately $100,000 over the 5 years that we lived there. I'm not going to claim that these results are typical, but I use this story as a representation of how much value can be gained by living sacrificially and thinking outside of the very narrow box provided to us by culture. We are expected to start our careers and immediately go into massive amounts of debt, acquiring things that we have not yet earned. A nicer house, better cars, endless vacations, more. The reality is that more will never make us happy. And the sooner that we can accept that and live within our means, the happier we will be, regardless of our income. I'm going to cover money management in a future episode, but for now I want to address balance. Part of our minimum standard will be to find a balance between healthy spending, saving, and giving. We are allowed to spend money. We are allowed to spend money on stupid and useless things that we enjoy. But if we give our heart over to consumption, then we will be severely hindered in our ability to honor God with our finances. Many Christians fall into the trap of thinking that they do not make enough money for saving or giving to be worthwhile, as if either needs to occur in $10,000 increments to bear fruit. Give $10, give $100, save $10 or $100. Every little bit helps. We are not called to solve world hunger on our own, but we are called to do more than nothing. The baseline giving for a Christian is the tithe, 10% to your local church. Unfortunately, this amount isn't about you and it isn't about your church. I strongly believe that much of what is given to the local church is squandered, but I have given 10% on every dollar that I have ever made because the tithe is about trusting God with our finances and building generous hearts in His believers. If you have never tithed, this will be a big change. 10% off the top before you do anything else. This isn't a maybe we'll give if there's money left over. This is we give to God first, and then we figure out the light bill. Although honestly, if you don't have enough money to tithe comfortably, it is almost always the fault of debt, cars, or a house payment. Seen through this lens, it raises the very uncomfortable question of where do we place our hope? Are you willing to drive a lesser car in pursuit of faithfulness? Would you be willing to move down in house? When my wife and I first got married, she had never tithed. We also had to pay a mortgage on my previous house that didn't sell and rent for our new apartment. Things were very tight. We did not have the luxury of going out to eat or dating in any way that required money. Under those circumstances, it was very difficult to advocate for the value of tithing, but I encouraged her to trust me, and we did it. We were in that financial position for about a year before my old home finally sold, and we finally had some room to breathe. There are a lot of things that would have been immediately improved by denying God what was His, but ultimately we were able to make it through. I don't like the idea of tithing in order to get something from God, but our financial situation has improved dramatically since that time, and I like to think that at least part of that is our faithfulness being rewarded. Now we get to wealth building. Money was not designed for this. Instead, excess money needs to be converted to assets that will either retain their value or grow over time. The question that Christians need to ask here is how much is enough, and at what point does wealth tempt us away from trusting in God? If you plan to retire at some point, then you will need to set money aside to that end. Even if you don't plan to retire, having substantial savings is a good idea such that you can more easily navigate any emergencies that you face along the way. The reality of the situation is that more wealth means that we will have more flexibility as we navigate the world. But how much of that flexibility is meaningful, and how much are we willing to sacrifice for increasingly small practical returns? The difference between $100,000 and $1 million saved is substantial as regards practicality. But the difference between $1 million and $2 million is dramatically less so. And there might as well not be a difference between 10 million and 12 million unless you have a very specific need for the money. If you are blessed in such a way that you can generate massive wealth with relatively little effort, then by all means do so. But for the rest of us, we need to figure out what specifically we are trying to accomplish in our wealth building and target something appropriate to our situation. Time to accept reality. How well do you know your financial situation? How much time and energy do you devote to acquiring unnecessary things? Do you tithe? Do you save? Generally, the first step is a thorough understanding of where you are by faithfully building out a budget. If you have cleared that hurdle, you can start to look at imbalances in your reality versus what you think would be more honoring to God. Do you need to make more money? Do you need to make less money and have more time? Fruit in this area looks like freedom, control, and contentment. By controlling our finances, we get the freedom to tell our money what we want from it instead of reacting to what everyone else wants from us. We get to control how much of our money goes to consumption, how much is given away to things that we love, and how much is saved towards a future that will further glorify our God. Ultimately, contentment is a superpower unknown by many in our culture. The ability to rest and relax knowing that striving beyond a certain point is meaningless, allowing us to forfeit those additional gains in pursuit of enough. God claims to be enough to sustain us. We are called to trust in Him instead of worldly things. Often the self-imposed burden of our finances and our unwillingness to control them betrays who we really worship. I think that if Christians can reclaim this ground, that the world will become a very different place. Not because we will all be rich, but because we will finally start being faithful. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Altered Call podcast. Before you go, I want to make you aware of our new YouTube page. There I will post a weekly update where I discuss the most recent episode of the podcast in more detail and tease information that is coming in future episodes. Feel free to like and subscribe here, there, and everywhere if you find value exploring these ideas. You can reach me by email using alex@alteredcall.com, or you can visit the website for additional information.